My name is Esther from Kenya. I was part of the class of 2007 on ethnoecology and community-based conservation. Some of the key highlights that came out were the marginalization of indigenous people and the methodologies that we need to use in the collection of data during our conservation work.
When you don't involve the local communities, we are bound to make policies that don't apply to people at grassroots. Supposing we suggested more participation from the local people, whereby we could even do something like a rural appraisal on various issues, where we could also use some of the biology methods, like community mapping of the resources they use, or even where we can free list all the resources people get from the forest or even from the parks. And then after that, we can be able to make participatory video whereby people air their opinions. In such a case, we are going to have a more inclusive policy that does not leave out even the minority groups.
When the park was established in 1991, the park and the forest reserve, they were removed from the park and the forest reserves. And yet they were depending on this forest as for their livelihood. Like they used to depend on hunting, collection of honey, and fruit gathering. And this was in Bwindi National Park, Mugahinga National Park, and the Chia Forest Reserve. So they have a shortage, they have problems of land. They have no land where they're living. When they removed from the forest, they are not compensated. They have no means of livelihood. All they depend on is cheap labor from the other local communities, the Bachiga, who employ them and then give them peanuts just to look after them. So they have become like drunkards and they're like living in all poverty.
What I see as the parallels between this particular case study and the case study in Uganda is that the San, like the Batwa, are not necessarily found in one country, which is Botswana. They are found in Botswana, South Africa, and Namibia. I'm going to talk about a small community which is located outside a park called Moremi, and this community is called Kwai, and these are the Bugakwe San, who are basically the San located within the wetlands of the Okavango. And what is interesting here is that this community was moved out in 1963 when the park was created. And since they were moved out, they have always remained almost close to the proximity of the park. For them, Kwai seems to be this very large area which is regarded as the traditional land or the area that they have always accessed resources from. Because they are located within a protected area, they cannot keep livestock like other agricultural groups. They cannot keep goats, cattle, and they cannot have larger fields for agricultural practice, but they have rather small gardens. And because of that, that creates conflicts. Conflict between wildlife conservation and the people because animals move out of the park to raid their gardens. And when you listen to people's stories, it is always about how they are facing problems with elephants feeding into their garden and also hippopotamus also feeding into their gardens. But at the same time, what is probably slightly different with Robert's case is that this community is now participating in tourism in one way or another, because when Botswana introduced community-based natural resource management in the 1990s, Kwai also became one of the communities that became a legal entity in this area because it is located in the protected area. So they are running their own community-based enterprise.
The people I'm going to talk about is the Bedouins living in the desert. My case study is in Egypt, and I'm going to talk about this place. According to the mass tourism and very high development activities running along the coast here, most of the Bedouin living in this rural area start to move here to find job opportunities, a better job, a better money for living. And what the point I want to raise about this issue is the lack of knowledge. We are losing the traditional knowledge. The way the knowledge transfer from the elder generation to younger generation is a problem now, because most of the younger generation are moving to work in a tourism activity which of course, bring a lot of money, and they are forgetting about their traditional knowledge. Other things which is most important as well is how this knowledge transfer, how we protect the knowledge, because actually the Bedouins have a very rich knowledge by the mean of how they're using plants, animals, herding, all this kind of knowledge. It is a problem that by the mean of medicinal plant, some researchers, some scientists coming to Sinai, taking this kind of drugs and then transport it to the big companies, and no profit coming back again to the Bedouin. So this is the most important issue now in Egypt, how to record this knowledge, how to save the knowledge, how to find a proper way for the knowledge to transfer from the elder generation to the younger generation. So I think that the course we had, very interesting, very important by the way they are teaching us, and it will be very helpful for me when I will going back to Egypt.
So Sita, what we're hearing from you is that the government came with a management plan, which they have already set up, and they wrote about it, they think about it without including the community. And now they come with that agenda and ask the community to fit in or to participate in. And this is very common in environment program, design and implementation.
And they call it also participatory forest. But the community doesn't feel really fitting on all this plan.
Yeah, it's very hard to talk about participation when you don't include community in the conception of that project.
The University of Botswana was involved in the production of a management plan for the management of the Okavango Delta. And the university's role was to facilitate community participation in the whole planning process. And what we did was the community was involved from the very beginning of the planning, from identifying issues, problems, and even ranking those issues. So we called the community to meetings, to workshops, and to all sorts of meetings to dialogue with government officers, with planners, as well as to negotiate what they thought were the priority issues that the plan should address.
In 2001, the government of Cameroon created the Lobeke National Park. One of the biggest innovations as far as this park is concerned is the creation of, in the inner core of the Lobeke National Park, what we are calling a community zone. This is the first time in Cameroon that the government is still taking into account local interest in the inner core of a protected area. From 2001 onward, we are trying to develop a co-management system in the community area of National Park. We are trying to put together all stakeholders, I mean local communities, local NGOs, park administration, so that all these stakeholders can sit together and develop principle of access and exploitation in the community zone of the National Park.
You're talking about the community use zone inside the park, and I wish really we can have in all countries, in all national parks, have community to have access to the resources inside the park and have that co-management that you were talking about with all the stakeholders.
My case is very difficult and delicate compared to the other three cases you've been hearing from my other presenters. As NGO, we kind of being caught in between the government and the communities, because we are working with communities through our environmental education community program. We're working with communities who are very hostile and angry with the government because they've been using this forest for ages and get their livelihoods from the forest, getting the building material like grasses for their roofs. And now it's upgraded into a national park. And the people don't have access now, and so we as the NGO, we are trying to act as a mediator between the communities and the government, trying to bring understanding. But the situation is very delicate, and there is no involvement of the community since from inception of the park. A lot of very endemic and endangered animals in that forest. So what we need is that forest needs to be conserved. At the same time, the communities need to get their basics from the forest. So it's more trying to educate them through our education programs. And when we get this understanding together, then I hope that's when we're going to bring this dialogue between the government. When they have understanding and they protected the area together, we can work together.
Right now we try to see how we can link conservation to people's needs so they can have access for their livelihood, but also they should know how to better conserve the forest, because it's very important too, because their life depends on the resources.
Yeah.
The best methods that we've learned, especially which I think can be applicable, include the participatory video, which would be able to portray this Batwa to the other communities and even other people in the global atmosphere, that the poverty they're experiencing, you'd see it. And I would think even the wealthy ranking and the household surveys would apply. Although I see the participatory video more helping the Batwa to be recognized and everyone knows what their status is like we learned in class.
You know, Robert, you're really absolutely right, because actually I found that a participatory video is a very good tool to let the locals applying the video shot how to represent their life, how to represent their culture. And then by showing this video to decision makers or government, it will give a real story about how they live, how's the culture, and it will give a very good impression.
We should always try to bring in the communities together, because these are communities that have that are well informed in terms of their environment, that have so much in terms of traditional knowledge systems.
That we need to strike a balance between conservation and meeting the local needs of the communities. This course, however, therefore, has provided us the necessary tools, especially the PVC and then the household survey, to give us an entry point for us to identify the needs of the local communities.